Greetings boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special video I have for you guys, and it's my Cruelty Squad's Is It Fun review. Now, why did I call it Is It Fun? I called it Is It Fun because I wanted to focus on the gameplay more so than the story. In this game, it was kind of easy to do that because the narrative isn't as in your face. There's no long cutscenes or anything like that. So maybe I will do another narrative video separate from this. Now, Cruelty Squad was made by consumer Softproducts in 2021. I had watched YouTube during this year, and one of my favorite YouTubers put me on to this game, and I played it. I didn't really get into it, but it was fun. It was very unique. And now that I had recently got gifted a new PC, I wanted to go back and fully experience this game for what it was. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about the game mechanics, everything about him, and then I'm going to give you a review, final verdict at the end on just how I feel about the game overall. Now, this is a long one, so I'm gonna put some thumbnails, timestamps, that's what I meant to say. I'm gonna put some timestamps on the screen for you, and sit back, enjoy my stupid little pea-brain take of this insane game. Thank you guys for watching, and enjoy. Now, Cruelty Squad is an open area game where it's not quite open world, but each level has an open level where you have the freedom of exploring and doing whatever you please in that given space. You play as a corporate liquidator, assassin, hitman, blah blah, where the main objective will be your target. I can compare the structure of the game to the Hitman franchise, where levels are picked in the main menu. This is where you will find the game's silly user face at work. Each level chosen in the menu is provided by a debriefing on each scenario by your employer. In this briefing, the player will find descriptions of the targets that need to be exterminated, as well as other useful information on the location where the mission takes place. Other neat little pieces of lore can also be obtained by these briefings. In the menu, you are also able to access your character's augments, equipment, and weapons loadout, and the stock market and the settings. All of this is accompanied by a very unique and cool looking menu background. In addition to the background, you will notice that there's a border on the perimeter of the screen. This border will symbolize which difficulty mode you are on. Load into the game, and what do you see? You will see your weapon of choice in traditional FPS fashion. Ammo counter on the bottom left screen, accompanied by a very cute little face. But then you quickly feast your eyes on a fat pulsating blurbo life gauge ever present on the top left of your screen. This thing is going to be chunky and will stay there for the majority of the game. Looking around, you'll find these target reticles. These target reticles are your targets that you will have to unalive on the level. The player also has a passive ability that is very crucial, which is an eyeball that will pop up on the left side of your screen if you're spotted by an enemy. Now that that's out of the way, let's take out your first targets. Gunplay in this game feels decent enough, though some weapons feel really fun in comparison to others. Overall, it feels snappy. This game features one of the quirkiest first-person shooter reload controls that I've ever laid my eyes upon and experienced. To reload, you do not just press the R button. You hold the right click down and you drag the weapon off of the screen past a tick mark that appears when you press the right click. This feature for some reason gives me Perfect Dark vibes because of the green aiming reticles, neon green designs. This unique reload also makes the game feel like I'm playing a pseudo light gun arcade cabinet due to the gun just disappearing off the screen once it's time to reload. It's almost like this indie developer decided that they didn't want to animate every weapon reload, so they opted for a very quirky little feature to make up for the lack of having time to animate each reload. But nevertheless, this feature fits right in with the game's overall weirdness of it. Headshots are going to be the way to go in this game. All generic humanoid enemies are able to be pacified by one shot to the dome. Non-headshots are accompanied by a nice visual splatter of blood if your weapon is doing lethal damage. There are tankier enemies in this game, and if you're not doing lethal damage, instead of the red blood spatter, you'll see green spatters of shards, signifying that the damage isn't going through necessarily. If you come across an enemy in this game and you happen to just blow them to bits, the player has the ability to loot their organs that randomly generate depending on enemy types. These organs can then be sold to the stock market tab that is accessible at any time in-game or in the main menu. When the player opens the stocks menu, they are greeted by the traditional stock tab. This tab features several companies in the game's universe that are able to depreciate and appreciate depending on your actions throughout the entirety of the game save. The next tab is where you would buy or sell organs that you found. And the third tab will be your buying and selling of fish. Now let's talk about fishing for a second. Fishing in this game is a simple mechanic that is only available if you swim to a certain house that is located on the 4th level to the game. At this house, you'll be greeted by a young jit that lets you take his fishing rod. Fishing is the best method in the game to obtain money. Once you've found any body of water in the game, any body of liquid, the player is able to cast their line. The fishing mechanic is a simple reaction game. Once the line is cast, you will wait until you get a bite. Once you get a bite, you click the left click as fast as you can to reel that bad boy in. Usually the rarer the fish, the faster you will have to click, and if you don't click in time, you'll miss the catch. Non-enemy NPCs in the levels are also able to be talked to. You're able to interact with these people and they'll give you some interesting insight depending on where you're at and who you're talking to on the lore, give you hints about the levels and certain secrets, or just expanding the lore in general. Once the player is able to eliminate the targets, the exit will open for the player to escape to. The player then has the freedom to sell organs, buy or sell stocks, fish, or explore the map and find some weapons, all before leaving through the exit. This exit is usually located where the player initially spawns, but there are also alternate exits around the level that can be found for use as well once you eliminate your target. Once the exit is reached, after eliminating the targets, the level statistics will pop up. Once this level statistics pops up, it will tell you what grade you got on the level. The grade is based off of how fast the player is able to complete the mission. Statistics menu will also show the time, how many kills you got, and how much money you earned from completing the mission. Money is a crucial part of this game, and it will allow the player to unlock new equipment, augments, stocks, and reconstruct your body after death, depending on which difficulty your body is set on. You happen to die before you can reach the exit, and you'll be greeted with Cruelty Squad's death mechanics. The death or life mechanics of the game reminds me of reverse hollowing in Dark Souls. The different physical states of life will grant the player certain liberties in the game, and the states also affect the game's difficulty. Cruelty Squad has 4 states of living. Listing them in ascending order of difficulty is Power of Misery, Flesh Automation, Divine Light, and Hope Eradicated. Easy/Power of Misery is the best life state if the player wants to save money, for its state takes $0 to reanimate. The player is also able to eat corpses to gain 1 health. Medium/Flesh Automation is the most useless life state of them all. This state seemingly does not have any special perks in the game whatsoever. Once the player dies 5 times in this state, they will descend to Power and Misery. Reconstruction costs $500. Hard/Divine Light has a perk where the player can access various doors hidden in the level that matches the screen border color scheme. Once the player dies in Divine Light, they will lose it instantly and descend to Flesh Automation. The only way to be able to get back to Divine Light is by obtaining the Divine Light Orb in the Archon Grid level. There's an Easter egg at the Cruelty Squad HQ where if the player changes the resolution to its lowest setting, it will spawn the orb for Divine Light and Hope Eradicated. I was able to find this hidden feature by accident when I first played the game back in 2021 when it released. I did not know that it was an Easter egg, so finding that out, that I was able to find that today, was kind of mind-boggling for me to realize. Divine Light is required to unlock the secret endings. Very Hard/Hope Eradicated, like Divine Light, is required to be able to access the game's hidden endings. Like Divine Light, Hope Eradicated gives the player access to certain doors that will resemble the screen's border. Now, everything that I've informed you about Cruelty Squad so far and continued through the game is not really explained through any typical tutorials whatsoever. Cruelty Squad advertised itself as a no hand-holding video game. Take that for its most literal sense. This game is brutally cryptic and puzzling by design. This is not a game I would recommend for any type of new beginner gamer whatsoever. This is a hardcore game that requires sort of a seasoned gamer to be able to consistently catch up and grasp with the hidden mechanics and weird things that this game is going to throw at you. Even if you do meet that criteria, you may still not be able to figure out some of the mechanics of the game. And if you want to be able to unlock all the secret levels and the endings that the game has to offer, external research into the game is almost guaranteed. Enemy AI in Cruelty Squad is not good, plain and simple. Alerted enemies will do about 2 things. The first thing they will do is if the player is close proximity of the enemy and is alerted, they will begin to come towards your direction, getting close enough to shake your hand before unleashing an attack. A completely viable strategy is shooting an enemy at a choke point of a door and wait for more enemies to fall in line, because they will just start to keep on coming to the door after you hit their friend in their face right in front of them. The second thing they'll do is scramble around frantically if you're not close proximity to that enemy. With that being said, enemy behavior is easy to predict, but Cruelty Squad's gameplay relies on more memorization of the enemy's location. This is apparent because the game is about mastering the levels more so than the enemy, because you will find yourself repeating the levels for a multitude of reasons. With that said, it still doesn't exclude the fact that pathfinding for enemies is very generic and bland in this game. Enemy variety, on the other hand, is greatly varied. There are essentially 4 main classes of enemies: humanoids, armored enemies, freaks, and bosses. The first class of enemy is the humanoids. These are going to be the standard fare of enemies throughout the game. The key thing about these enemies is that they're all able to be taken out by a single shot to the noggin. Within the class of the humanoids, the only noticeable difference between them and their behavior is a result of different weapons that they use. All pistols, submachine guns, and assault rifle humanoids are going to be able to attack the player with close to mid-range efficiency. These enemies are going to be the majority of the encounters in the game. Humanoids are all fairly self-explanatory depending on what weapons they wield. The shotgun users are going to run in your face and try to gib you to death, while the launcher enemies are going to be your close to mid-range threat, shooting rockets or gas bombs. The most formidable foe in this class is going to be the sniper wielders. Snipers, depending on what difficulty you play on, are capable of one-shotting the player if they have not memorized the enemy layouts for the level. One last notable humanoid are the ones equipped with an active camo-like cloak. These enemies remind me of an episode of SpongeBob where he has a little bubble buddy, because even though they have this active camo cloak on, you can still practically see them. They're just iridescent. Armored enemies are going to be your more chunkier boys. This class features one of my favorite enemies in the game. This enemy is dubbed Necromech. The Necromech is probably the most terrifying enemy in the game. At about 20 feet tall, these mechs are equipped with akimbo LMGs that will shred through you when they have locked onto the player. The player will know instantly when they're spotted by one of these things because they'll let out this low-bit mechanical screeching. The Necromechs are not able to be taken down by ordinary gunfire. Heavy weapons such as the LMG and the security rocket launcher are some of the only weapons that are capable of dealing with this threat. The next armored enemy are what I like to call the Rockmen. Rockmen are also heavily armored like the Necromechs, but are about 7 feet tall, and instead of having akimbo LMGs, these rock-hard individuals will run your ass down to deliver hands. The Rockmen are coming down and rocking your shit when they have eyes on you. The best way to handle these enemies is again using a high caliber weapon and explosives. The last subclass is the Bouncy Boys. I call them the Bouncy Boys because they wear a shock trooper bouncy suit that lets you take no fall damage. These enemies are going to look like a standard humanoid, but they're going to have a red bubble suit. The best way to deal with these Bouncy Boys is to shoot them in the eye slits where their armor do not protect them. The most varied class of enemies are going to be the Freaks. In this class, you will find a nice assortment of abominations that will make the player probably shit the bed or uninstall the game. The first class of enemy is a dog, a sus dog. This pup has a horrific gaping mouth that they will use to chomp the player down if you're not able to take it down in time. These pups are one of the faster enemies in the game, but also are one of the most light work or easiest enemies to be able to handle. The next freak is probably the most inconvenient enemy in the game. a humanoid-like woman with a knife that will shit herself when she is killed, leaving a toxic gas cloud around her corpse that will frick you up if you stand in it. This enemy is inconvenient because if you kill her in a doorway that you have to go through, you will be waiting a couple seconds for the toxic cloud to dissipate. This can change the pace of a run if they die in a key walkway. The most bullhonky MFer in the game are these tiny throbbing penises called flesh rats. Now this gotta be one of the most insane, demonic, satanic, manic decisions to be ever programmed. These things are little schmeedy sized freaky ass worms that will 100% kill or take away half of your health if the player is not studying every pixel on the floor. This is because the enemy is the smallest enemy I've ever seen in a video game. These small flesh rats come in several or almost a dozen at a time. They will inch towards the player, and when it reaches you, it will deliver a bite that will poison the player, taking the health bar in half once the effect wears off. Because of the size of these things, the player needs literal pinpoint accuracy to be able to deal with them in a consistent manner. There's another enemy on the freak list that combos with this enemy type. This enemy is the Fleshmen. These enemies are humanoid-like with one glaring difference, and that is that they have a large scrotum on their heads. Do not get them confused with another enemy that shares a lot of physical traits with the Fleshmen. Those are psychos. These enemies carry pistols that are not a big deal to the player. What is the big deal is that once their bodies get destroyed, they unleash one of the unholy flesh rats for you to deal with. The best way to deal with these guys is to aim for their head and try not to turn them into bits, because if that happens, then you will have one of the rats to now deal with. Now the little brother to the Fleshmen is the psychos. These are my favorite enemies in the game due to its unique status effects, making the player have to really think about how they're going to take them out. When the psycho spots the player will be under some sort of sickening, nauseating mind control effect where the screen gets all willy-nilly and then your gun automatically starts to fire without your control. This means that it's best to take out these enemies stealthily or fast enough where they do not end up looking in your direction. This game is also officially a zombie game because they have zombies. But I like to call them gingerbread men because that's what they look like. The gingerbread men are not able to be killed by conventional means. Almost all weapons in the game are not able to kill this enemy. What will happen is when the player deals critical damage to a gingerbread man, they will fall to the ground and get back up in about 5 seconds or so. This means that taking out other enemy types is the best strategy when clearing a room that may have ginger boys mixed with other mobs. There's a gun that you can find in this game called the DNA Scrambler that will be able to take out these enemies, not by killing them, but by altering their genetic makeup, making them a cluster of flesh that can be cleared out after you shoot them. There are these cube things in the game that you'll run into occasionally. Just stay back and shoot them, and then you'll be good. The most unique looking enemy in the game are these flower enemies. These things are basically large seals with cute flower-like faces. Flower's main attack is throwing up at the player. I honestly do not know how much damage they do because I don't think I've been hit once throughout this game. These things are slight. The next freak is a cube-like enemy called flesh pigs. The flesh pigs are medium-sized cube-shaped enemies that, like the Rockmen, will run down the player to deal damage. Once spotted by this enemy, they will go invisible like they have active camo on. Their silhouettes are still able to be tracked due to its iridescence. These enemies are mainly in the late game, so powerful weapons will be able to handle these things with ease. I also do not think these things have touched me once while playing. The last of the freaks that I'm going to mention are the Pac-Men. These Pac-Man, or Gorbinos, are exclusive to the Archon grid level. This is one of the most unique levels in the game, where it features a maze that entraps the player in rooms with low ceiling, preventing vertical movement. These places will feature the Pac-Men. The Pac-Men will move towards the player in tiles, shifting across the grid to devour you. You cannot kill these things. Once a Pac-Man has touched you, you can say goodbye to your health bar. Bosses are the last enemy class and by far the worst enemy type on the list. Now the first boss is the best boss in the game. I'd like to call him the Red Sun guy, or Braxis, and he's just gonna throw a bunch of crap on your screen, or male secretions, what it looks like, and all you have to do is dodge these and shoot the red round circles and you're done. You can easily cheese this by sitting in the room before the room with a Braxis in it and just snipe them from there. The next boss you're gonna face is the Cruelty Squad CEO, is what I dubbed him, and this one stinks balls. I was able to find out a strategy to kill him without using the best gun in the game because he has so much health. And that method was not a fun method to use because I was just sitting there shooting him with the sniper with the rocket launcher for like 12 minutes straight. I was able to pull off this feat by using the ammo gland implants, which reloads your weapon with bullets over time and it takes away your reload. So with weapons with low ammo capacity, it works very well in this case. So just shooting a rocket launcher and switching to your sniper rifle and just shooting one at a time was how I was able to defeat this BS foe. Now those were the most of the enemies that are in Cruelty Squad. There are the few that I haven't mentioned due to the fact that I haven't yet encountered them. There are also many interesting variants of existing enemies in the game to find. Where Cruelty Squad shines is in its variety of enemies and weapons, giving the player a very diverse sandbox to be able to play around and experiment with. Now for this section, I'm not going to cover every piece of weapon and equipment, but I'm only going to highlight some notable pieces of equipment and weapons that stood out to me and was my go-to throughout the game. This is also partly because during my playthrough I was simply not able to find every weapon and use every equipment in the game because either I didn't find it or I didn't buy it. The weapon system in this game is sort of an extraction style. New weapons are 99% of the time going to be obtained through finding them in the level. When a player finds a weapon that they want to unlock, the player has to beat the level carrying said weapon on their way out in the exit. If they do not do this, then the player will not be able to access the weapon on the loadout menu. This mechanic forces the player to get good with what they have to work at the time, cultivating the skills needed to be able to access new weaponry rather than having the ability to just buy them at the shop. On the other hand, equipment and augments can be bought in the equipment menu and they can be found and hidden in the levels. Once a player finds a new equipment in the level, the player can instantly leave the game and immediately equip said found equipment. You would have kind of sort of figured that, given the hardcore nature of the game, that they would have the same sort of system set up like the weapons. But I think this would force the developer to change how the level design is to be tailored around finding these hidden equipment and weapons. Nevertheless, I think that it makes sense mechanically in comparison to the other system that this game has in place. Now, when talking about this game's weapons and equipment, I want to separate early game with me playing the game with little to no research outside of the game itself, to late game when I'm looking up more things online so I can find the hidden endings and hidden equipment that this game may have to find. Given the whole aesthetic of the game, you would think that there would be a lot more fictional weapons, but almost most of the weapon selection are essentially replications of a lot of guns in real life. This is something that was sort of a treat to see, given the fact that I'm a bit of a gun nut in real life. A few notable IRL guns are going to be the prototype H&K G11, which essentially carries all of early game. Then we have the AN-94, which is found mid-game and absolutely shreds enemies. And then a gun that I haven't found in-game called the Zip 22 in real life, in-game called the Zippy 3000, is based off of gun that I had no idea that it existed. This is probably due to good reason, because the gun was a flop in the gun industry. So early game, you're going to want to get your hands on the G11 ASAP, which can be found on the very first level. The G11 will give you a decent amount of value with the utilization of its scope, giving the player the ability to snipe targets from across the map. The next gun you're going to want to get your hands on is the LMG. Now this is going to be the Swiss Army knife to take care of almost every enemy in the game. This LMG features 150 magazine capacity of armor-piercing rounds, and this thing is gonna shred. Now late game, I think the most consistent loadout will be using the LMG and the security rocket launcher in tandem. Both of these weapons are going to be capable of taking out your heavily armored enemies. This will leave a player being able to answer basically everything this game has to throw. With that said, there is a much better gun in the game capable of one-shotting any enemy. This gun is going to be called the transactional rifle. Have you ever thought or wished that a gun in a game would scale to how much money you had? This means the damage output of the gun is based on how much commas you have in your in-game bank or brokerage account. This gun is heavenly. Now, one of the best implants that you can find early in the game that's going to carry you throughout the whole game is going to be the life sensor, which costs $9,000. This head implant in the form of glasses that gives the player wall hacks by highlighting enemies with a nice green circle from close to mid-range. This is going to significantly increase the player's enemy awareness, because the player does not need to rely on footsteps or the physical sight of the enemy. This implant is especially clutch due to its ability to highlight small flesh rats that may be hidden on each level, giving the player the greatest counter to one of the most troubling enemies in the game. The life sensor also successfully removes the game's horror element, because enemies can kick down a door in your face and scare the crap out of you, which happened to me quite a few times when I did not have this implant. The player gains so much value from this, it's insane to fathom. The wall hacking ability also gives the player insane insight on each level, because you could find secret rooms that you wouldn't be able to find if you didn't have these implants in to see where enemies are in these hidden rooms. early game, I was also able to pick up a speed enhancer total package, which is going to cost $6,000. Now, this speed enhancer total package implant for the leg is going to give you increased walk or run speed with the drawback of taking more damage. Now, this is very clutch due to its ability to give you very fast mobility, and bunny hopping in this game is very effective. And bunny hopping comboed with the speed enhancer total package is going to give you very fast run times for early game. The best implant in this game I was able to pick up in its mid game point. This is going to be the Grapendix, costing $50,000. The Grapendix is an implant that looks like an intestine, that essentially a grappling hook, turning you to Spider-Man or a cursed version of that. This implant is so fun to use. It's pretty exhilarating. The only downside to this implant is that there's going to be a learning curve to know how the grappling hook works, how far you need to shoot it. But once you get that down to even a basic level of mastery, man, you're going to find a lot of value from this. The downsides are going to evaporate essentially after you just know how to use it. If you're stuck somewhere, anywhere, the grappling hook or Grapendix is going to be your answer for basically everything. Fall damage is your only concern when it comes to the Grapendix. The next equipment is going to be God tier, especially when you're using the Grapendix, and it's going to be the Bounty or Shock Trooper suit found in one of the game's levels. This suit grants the player immunity to fall damage, which significantly is going to change how you will go about each level. Now, the implants and equipment that I highlighted are only the surface, the tip of the iceberg in this game. There's a lot more to offer in this category. Fishing will be the best way to be able to afford all these. The level design in this game is crafted in a way that makes the player question if they have the right equipment for each stage. Most, if not all, the game benefits for having augments that greatly increases your verticality and agility, granting the user the ability to access places they would not be able to access. The Grapendix will allow the player to utilize this feat. There are levels that feel very easy to navigate in the early game, but on the other hand, the late game or secret levels feel like they are intentionally designed to mentally give the player a lobotomy. Now, with that said, I would like to take this time to talk about this game's final level, Trauma Loop, and how insane this level was to me. Firstly, this level completely strips the player from all of their implants and equipment. I cannot explain how baffling this was to me when I first booted up this level. Everything that I had slaved for virtually was gone. The only thing the player has in their toolbox is the tool weapons that they're able to pick out before they enter the level. As frustrating as it is not being able to utilize the essential equipment such as the life sensor or the Grapendix, this level made me think outside the box. So much so that I found one of the game's base movement mechanics in the last level. So you're telling me that I had the ability to wall bounce this whole time? Trauma Loop features a path where wall bouncing and platforming was a crucial component of the level. Now granted, I wasn't able to find much on this path, but the game recognizes this wall bouncing mechanic and has a Super Mario-like platformer section where the player needs to utilize this mechanic. This was something that completely blew me away, where it seems that this game never ceased to surprise me. Trauma Loop even features a completely unique enemy type. Now, the other thing about this level is that there's no target objective, so the player has to find their way out. The fact that there is no clear objective while playing this level gives the player a real sense of hopelessness and powerlessness, as your power is quite literally stripped away from you when you load into the level. I think that this completely sums up the experience of Cruelty Squad. The experience of playing a game that is forcing your ignorance while being scrappy and resourceful enough to be able to overcome what this game has to throw at you through all the players' doubt of themselves. Now, overall, the game incentivizes the player to go through the levels multiple times. This will make the player change their tactics and equipment and abilities and their weapons to better suit the certain level that they choose to play. This is where Cruelty Squad shines. Now, the level of variety in Cruelty Squad, I would say, is really good. The first half of the early game is where the levels sort of feel the same and will lack mostly in variety. But sort of mid to late game or end game, that's when you're gonna find the most variety in levels. Now, the later, more varied levels will make the player think more about how they will navigate through these different biomes or stages. So your equipment and abilities will be on the forefront of your mind when you load in to a level. Now, is the game fun? While I highly praise Cruelty Squad's truly incredible sandbox offering, giving the player fun tools to be able to solve problems with, along with an aesthetically unique experience, this game, much like a series like Dark Souls or Souls-likes, tells the player practically nothing about how the game works or how to play it. As a result, YouTube how-tos or wiki research is almost required to be able to grasp some of the more pillar game mechanics, as well as essentially completing half of the game's content. This makes the game incredibly hard for an average Joe gamer. For me, I enjoyed the game a lot and will continue to jump back in it even though I completed it, for there's a lot of more things I want to do and see. Do I think this game is great? Aesthetically? Artistically, yes. Maybe even a masterpiece in the sense of how this game makes me feel. Objectively, as far as fun is concerned, I don't think it's quite on that masterpiece level. With better enemy AI and a more fine-tuned economic system, this game can definitely be on that upper echelon of greatness.